In today's video, we're going to talk about monthly comics and when it's okay to pull the plug on a comic series you're just not digging. Let's get into it. What's up guys, welcome to the channel. My name is John and you're watching Old Stuff is Cool. Today we have the fourth installment of Recent Comic Reads, aka Endings Are Okay. I know everyone has different parameters to why they follow a series and why they cancel a series, but more often than not, amongst comic collectors, it's really hard to get off that train, especially when it comes to monthly or bi-monthly new comic books. So that's the topic we're going to talk about today, and I'll be sharing with you 5 different titles that I've recently canceled. But before we get into that, I just want to show you some cool stuff, and this was a recent poll. It's a facsimile. I'm not getting as many of these as I used to, but I couldn't pass up on this, and I had it pulled for my box. It is Silver Surfer Annual number 4, probably one of the best Marvel Comics covers, to me at least. For sure, this book is on my grail list, along with Giant Size X-Men number 1. It features one of my favorite Marvel, if not comic book characters of all time, Silver Surfer, along with the mighty Thor, who's not too shabby himself. And this beautiful cover is by John Buscema. As I might have mentioned before, I love these facsimiles. They're great ways to enjoy books that might be outside your budget. And if you're a little creative or you want to display, some comic art in the original, comic standard format and don't really want to worry about the sun damaging your, precious graded copy or, original copy, I think facsimiles are a great option. Easily one of my favorite comic covers ever from Marvel. So I thought we'd start out with that. And now moving on to the main part of the video. Yeah, we're gonna talk about 5 different series that I have canceled or actually just straight up ended because they were a event or a limited series. So first up, we're gonna talk about Ultimate Endgame, issue number 5. And just a warning, spoilers ahead. This story, I think it ended on a positive note. It was definitely one of the better issues amongst the 5. I think it was very up and down. I don't know exactly how much time, writer Dennis Camp and even the other Ultimate writers had as a heads up to wrap up their stories. I know the Ultimates, Dennis Camp's main series, and did a lot of the heavy lifting of the world building of this iteration of the Ultimate Universe. Definitely probably could have used, another, 6 to 12 issues easily. And in a similar way, Ultimate Endgame kind of could have, it could have benefited from being like a 6-issue miniseries perhaps. Squishing it all in a 5-issue series, I think there's just, it just gets to be a lot, especially pacing, I think really suffers. And while this one was an enjoyable read, I think it tried to do its best to kind of tie up loose ends. The biggest surprise was on the very last page, it clearly states that this is not the end of the Ultimate Universe. And yes, I know Marvel's not totally closing shop on the Ultimate Universe, but leading up to it and along with like Ultimate Spider-Man and other titles, it certainly seemed like a definitive end. And yes, I have read comic books for like almost 40 years now, so I really should know better and know that nothing is ever truly dead in the world of comic books. But I don't know, it just left a bad taste in my mouth because I thought I thought we were wrapping things up. Despite that criticism, I'm a sap at the end, and if you can wrap up some nice storylines, the biggest thing was, we had the death of Ultimate Peter Parker back in issue 2 or 3, and that was quite the surprise, although, I kind of predicted that he'd come back before the end. And with the limited time and space, I thought they did a pretty good job just, putting a bow on the various characters of the Ultimate Universe. I give this a 3.5 out of 5. And sticking with books by writer Dennis Camp, let's head over to DC's Absolute Universe with DC's Absolute Martian Manhunter number 12. This is the conclusion of this series, and I talked about it a little bit before where issues 1 through 6, very tight, very enjoyable, probably one of my favorites from last year. But this second story arc, I was just waiting for it to end. I mean, even by issue like 9 or 10, I was like, okay, the completionist in me did not want to get off the train, and I'm sure many of you struggle with that too. So again, the title of today's episode, Endings Are Okay. If you struggle with being a completionist, if it's scratching some sort of OCD itch like me, I am here with you. I share that pain. I am trying to deprogram myself from being a completionist in that way. And with some series coming up later in the video, I was able to pull the plug. This one, I was so close to the end, and I think I had such love for the first 6 issues. I wanted to stick it through. Unfortunately, yeah, I really, really disliked this second arc of Absolute Martian Manhunter. But there's some similarities with Ultimate Endgame 5. I think this book in particular does a good job in wrapping the story up. It's still a big, confusing mess. That's one thing where even I experienced in the first story arc, where I didn't always follow what's going on. I either had to reread the story or even go online and see some synopsis or people's opinions on it to really fully grasp what was going on. It might be a me issue, but I do consider myself fairly intelligent, and I don't think one should work that hard to understand a basic comic book. I mean, I love metaphors and visual allegories and all of that, but I think this one maybe was trying a little too hard. In the end, I still give this, the final issue, 3 out of 5 stars. But overall, this arc, man, it definitely probably averages a 2 or 2.5 for me, unfortunately. And now we're moving on to Image Comics. Guys, I had such high hopes for this series. I have Corpse Knight issue number 1 here, as well as issue 2. Issue 2 is where I said, I don't want to be a part of this on a monthly basis. I think for any of these that I'm pulling the plug on, I still will come back and check it out, borrow it digitally or something once the story is complete. But I had such high hopes for this one. I really enjoyed issue number 1. Corpse Knight by no means is all bad. I mean, I think what it really has going for it is the art and the colors. I mean, just look at that. I mean, it pops out the stand, and this story that's set in medieval France, a father and daughter tale. It had a great elevator pitch, but where it kind of got off the rails for me is in issue 2. In reading this and even sitting to appreciate the art, I was done with this book in 5 minutes tops. And there's something about the price versus the satisfaction of the book. Image books, for the most part, are still like $3.99. And some of you might have a subscription or a employee discount, so maybe a little less than that. But monthly comics are still an expensive ask, and when we have a number of different titles that we're collecting, whether you're a 2-book reader to a 24-book reader, it all adds up, right? So when I was done reading this in 5 minutes, and on top of that, like, the pacing is it's terrible. I don't know any other way to say. There's new characters introduced with no dialogue whatsoever, no exposition. And I'm not asking for Claremont levels of exposition or dialogue, but a little bit of something. Because I feel like what happens in this, in the second issue alone, could have been stretched out much more. And I understand this is a limited series, so maybe the writer had to get, the characters to a certain point before issue 3. However, I think it's just really missing a chance to world build and even just give some more personality to the characters. I mean, I really appreciate that. I really appreciate character-driven stories. If in case you guys have never thought, is the story character-driven versus plot-driven? I think people tend to be drawn to one or the other. So, you give me a story with a lot of heart. The characters' motivations are clear. Sign me up. But this one, maybe it's a more plot-driven story, but given how fast it was to read and how little we were given, I can't commit to this on a monthly basis. But again, like I said, I'll circle back around to it once it's all said and done and read it as a trade. Unfortunately, to rate issue 2 by itself, it's a 2 out of 5 stars. For the fourth book we're looking at today, it's White Sky, issue number 4. This is one of the books that, back earlier in the year when there are all these very, very hyped up Image comics. And, we're not done talking about the hype books. Wait for the end of the video. But White Sky was one of those titles. White Sky issue number 1, when it hit the stands, I think it sold out immediately. It's been back to print either 3 or 4 times. And I will say, the premise of the story, it got me. It's a bit of a, it's got post-apocalyptic stuff. Instead of zombies, we have kind of these ghosts or demons or something paranormal. And again, the art is great on this one. I think the writing is actually is pretty solid as well, but there's just not enough of it hooking me to get issue 5. I think this might either the first arc is done in 6 issues or it's a limited 6-issue series, something to that effect. I'm just not getting enough per issue. That being said, there are a lot of great scenes where it's like quiet, eerie stuff you'd want in a book like this, but it comes down to that formula again for $3.99 a month. For me, it's not worth the price of admission. I mean, if you are trade paperback or graphic novel readers, it's just cheaper to purchase it in that format if that's what you're doing. Or for me, I always talk about borrowing stuff from the library, reading stuff digitally, and this kind of falls in the category of like, yes, I want to see how this first arc wraps up, but I don't need to do so in a month-to-month basis. And just for further context, I am looking at my overall comic book budget and how much of that is eaten by monthly books versus things I can sink into back issues, whether they be back issue runs or big wall books, big key issues. So all of that is what I have in mind in how I'm making my cuts. So although I am dropping White Sky from my pull list, I still give this issue a 3 out of 5 stars. We'll circle back around and maybe I'll take a look at this and share my feedback with you guys once the first story arc is all done. And last but not least, the 5th book we're talking about today, it is a title from that time of hype Image books. It's the one that probably started off that whole trend. It's Dork. And this is issue number 6. Great cover here. Yeah, I'm a little sad to include this here, but while I've been enjoying the series, I think I really want to trade weight on this one. Yeah, it reads pretty quickly, although I like what we're being given. I think there's enough, there are enough reveals each issue to keep you going. But as I'm trying to kind of tighten my wallet on my monthly comic book, monthly new book budget rather, this is not cutting it. And also, I don't know, it might be because it's a more, cartoony style, but I noticed this in a very disappointing X-Men 97 Season 2 Issue 1. I picked that book up, and I'm loving, I love the first season, I'm really enjoying the second season, but I really noticed, at least for the comic book version, it looked kind of like, I don't know if there's a good way to say this, but kind of the way that webcomics, and for illustrators, they're doing a daily strip or something of that sort. Backgrounds are kind of non-existent. If they're just like a color gradient in the back or something. That's a little bit of the look that many of the panels get in Dork, and it was even worse in that X-Men 97 Season 2 issue, and it just takes me out. It does match that animation cartoony style, but I don't know. I think maybe I am just getting more old and curmudgeonly, or I'm just getting more picky for what I want from interior comic art. That was one factor. The other one is just that I think I will continue this series in trade. I mean, there are other Image comics in particular that I strictly read in trade format. A lot of the Energon universe, aside from the main Transformers title, G.I. Joe Void Rivals, I exclusively read that in trade format. And so this is not really a way to disparage Dork. It's just that I recognize I don't need to pick this up monthly, but I'll enjoy it whenever the next volume is out. So yeah, I guess that's pretty straightforward because I love the art, and again, I love the story direction. Actually, there's a great reveal in this one. Given that this is probably the newest book of the batch, basically Doric's father is revealed. Yeah, and I will say that reveal was really well done and executed. So yeah, we're gonna shift to trade wing for this one. In the end, I gave this issue, issue number 6, a 3.5 stars out of 5. And that'll do it for this edition of Recent Comic Reads. Guys, were you following, or are you still following any of the titles that we talked about today? I'd love to hear your opinion, whether you agree, disagree, you want to get into an argument about it, whatever the case, it can happen down in the comments below. But I do want to thank you so much for joining me for this video, and I hope to catch you in the next one. Take care.